Hey everybody, and welcome to Super Comic Fun Times Thingisms 101, the comic book series that explores the comic book world's things. And starting us off, the Swamp Thing. You saw a few weeks ago when I unpacked this book, and now we're going to put it to educational use. So, starting off, as I mentioned before, the Swamp Thing first appeared in the House of Secrets in a short eight-page story by Len Wein, and Bernie Wrightson is credited with the art. What you have here is basic horror story, and reading this, I realized that a lot of horror stories are really just romance stories. Romance comic books were very popular in the 50s, if not the most popular. I don't, I'm not going to give you a citation for that, so you'll have to look that up on your own. But what I noticed reading this is it just struck me that some of the comic books I'd read, there'd been one where a guy comes to an old plantation mansion in the South, and he meets a ghost there, and the ghost tells him, a Southern Belle ghost, and she says, well, there's this treasure here, I'll help you find it. And he goes, well, why would you do that? She goes, well, it will set me free, I'm just guarding it. And she leads him to this trunk, and there's a Civil War Confederate uniform in there. She hasn't put it on, and then she tries to kill him, but he walks away. As the thing about that story is he was the spitting image of the lover that she lost in the Civil War, and she was trying to recreate that. But in that case, it didn't work. In another story, the opposite can be true too. There's a story I remember. I don't know who wrote it. I don't know who wrote the other one either, but it's just something I read as a kid. It was called Till Death Do Us Part. And it was about these two people, a married couple who hated each other. They were always sniping at each other. They might have been about to get a divorce, or they might have been about to murder each other. I kind of forget, when the nuclear bombs fall. And then suddenly they're melded together. Till death do us part, in the last frame was their legs and part of their shoulders were somehow melted together from the nuclear fallout. And so that's kind of an anti-romance story. So in this case, you have the Swamp Thing coming up, and he's kind of remembering he had been married to this woman whose name is Susan, I think. His name was Alec Olson. He was a scientist. And then they had this third wheel who was actually in love with, not Susan, it's Linda Olson Ridge. So he was in love with Linda, and so he arranged for an explosion in the lab, drags the body out to the swamp, and whatever formula they were working on, it got into Alex's skin, and he turns into the Swamp Thing. And every night he trudges up to the house to look at the life he used to know. But then this guy here, I forget his name, he begins to suspect that Linda is going to figure out that he murdered her husband, and so he decides to kill her. And the Swamp Thing is just about to go away, but when he sees his wife is about to get murdered, walks in, crashes through the window, kills his killer, and then shambles off. And Linda is free, but he just kind of goes, if tears could come, they would. But he can't cry because he's a monster now. And you don't get much more explanation than that. So I guess this story was so successful, I guess it got a lot of fan mail, that a year later they launched The Swamp Thing. This story, the basic beginning is kind of true. The Swamp Thing is coming to the house. And in this case, this follows the movie. If you saw the movie from the 80s, this follows the movie fairly closely. In this case, it's Alec Holland and his wife. They're two super genius scientists, and they're working together. This guy isn't a love interest this time, but he's the government agent protecting them. They're working in this barn, and they're working on a formula that will be able to cause plants to grow, and they expect to be able to make deserts into green oases. So he comes to the house, and then we get the backstory. And this story is pretty good. It's a pretty good first issue. Here you see the plants growing. And then they're visited by some spies. and the spies make him an offer for it, which it's kind of confusing. There's like a sheriff. There's barely any security. This guy is supposed to be protecting him. Well, not that guy, but the other guy is supposed to be protecting him. He tells him there's a patrol car that comes by fairly regularly. What the heck? So then you can have these spies just kind of show up, and then like he comes back and he tells them, you should call me, and then the bad guy send this dog. He's got a microphone in him, and then they're kind of listening in and spying. And this guy, he's got this baboon. It's really weird. And they find out they're close to discovering the formula, and they don't want the government to get it. If I can't have it, nobody will. The Hollands and their formula must be destroyed. Makes no sense to me, but you go along with it. So anyways, they decide to plant a bomb when they can't get the formula. I don't know why they don't just steal notes and stuff. I'm sure there's no mention of these guys, having eidetic memories. But I love this scene. So the explosion happens. Instead of being dragged out to the swamp, he's on fire. The chemicals from the super growth formula is on him, and he plunges into the swamp, presumably to drown. But of course, we know that didn't happen because we were watching the beginning of the story. So then, funny, when I was a kid, it used to rain like this, dark and chilling, as if the sky were alive and living and felt pain. It feels that way again tonight. And lady, I don't like it. And yeah, to me, it's just so weird. It's his fault. Again, you kind of just got to go with it because you got to end up with the Swamp Thing. So the plants and stuff kind of form around his body, and he becomes the moss monster we know today. Swamp Thing. And it says, the explosion should have killed me, but it didn't. But why? The formula, biorestorative on the table when it blew. I said I could make forests out of deserts, and it did. It did. I don't know. I kind of like this story. It's silly, like a lot of it. And of course, it's got the romantic element. But then what happens is the bad guys come back because they didn't do they're really incompetent bad guys. It's like, yeah, they put the bomb in, and then the government, the barn blows up. But then the government builds it again, and so that she can continue the work. And they still don't up the security. What the heck? What the heck? So yeah, her name was Linda. Okay. And then it doesn't really matter because she's dead. She's dead now. And there's the dog. And so he goes to get the bad guys. Stop. Now, in this early days, the Swamp Thing has trouble speaking. Mostly you can tell it's word bubbles, but when he gets really angry, he just yells stop, and he crushes their car. Them again, Ferret and his friends, the ones who killed me and my Linda. So yeah, he thinks of himself as being dead, which is very interesting because Alan Moore will take that idea and run with it. In about 15 years' time. I can't remember when his... And then here we've got kind of a Wicked Witch scene. It's like, this is near the end of the book, and this thing pointing its fingers with these kind of monsters around is like, there, my pets, the one we've been searching for. There is the one we must have. Fetch him, my pets, bring him to me. And so that's the end, and then we come to the next chapter. Swamp Thing is still hanging out with the dog. This guy, his name is Cable, and he becomes like the Jack McGee from The Incredible Hulk, or Javert from Les Miserables, and he kind of, at least I haven't read that far into this book, but he starts to be the one who chases the Swamp Thing. He's got to bring him to justice because the thing he thinks killed his friends, even though he basically did without the spies. So we recap the beginning and look at these monsters. I really loved it when I got to this panel. Like, I love this thing. This thing looks like it's out of Basket Case. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. It's pretty terrible, but if you got nothing better to watch, it might be a fun watch. And yeah, they just got all these weird faces. I really like the imagination with these monsters they've got. So you've got lots of monsters in here and it's Halloween. This is one of the reasons I wanted to do this. So however they do it, the monsters, look at that. It's like, it's just arms and kind of like, I don't know what, a claw at the bottom. And they got them tied to this crucifix, and these monsters can fly a plane. Okay, so yeah, that's what I did like that too, is you see the Swamp Thing tied to the bottom of the plane. They don't even bring him inside. And I guess it really is not easy being green. And they take him to Arcane Land. And yeah, very gothic. This reminds me, was it White Zombie? I can't remember. There's a very famous old movie where the thing is up on the hill. The castle is up on the hill, and it's just very cool. Maybe it's a silent movie. I don't think it's Nosferatu, but no. Have to get away, collect my thoughts, discover where I am before. No. So this is where we meet Arcane. I really only know Arcane from the TV show. I don't remember him in the movie all that well. But instead of being a young, dashing scientist type like from the USA TV show, he's this old, wretched thing, which makes some sense. I met him in Alan Moore's run. He's in there very briefly. He's spoilers, he's dead by that time and in hell. And so, yeah, I'd almost given up hope of obtaining the necessary body when I chanced to spy you in this ancient mirror. I know all about you, the experiments, the explosion, murder of your wife, and there's something I can do for you. How would you like to be human once again, Dr. Alec Holland? And so what they do here is they do the old body swap thing, and it's like, Dr. Holland, what's wrong with you? Don't you want to be human? Don't you care? And he just looks at him and, I care. And so they go through this body swap. And yeah, this Arcane, he just wants to live forever. He doesn't care what his body looks like. He's not vain like that. And look at that car. That's a very nice car. I didn't notice it when I read it the last time. And so there he is, Doctor. The little item shall make you normal once again. So I guess it doesn't do it here. Oh, I guess I was confused. He's just kind of giving an examination. So yeah, there's something in that urn. It's a magic urn or something. And they have to like say, Dr. Holland, with the fervor of a man haunted by the grimmest face of hell, his face now knowing, who now finds salvation beckoning with red ancient eyes, the cracked crystal voice drones on. There comes an impossible pain, like the rending of a soul. And so, yeah, they have to chant something. And he has to want it a lot. Like, I think what was the title of this episode? The Man Who Wanted Forever. And so he does it. He's able to become human again. It's a little confusing to me. I think he's very traumatized at this point. He's been killed, more or less, and his wife has been killed. And, then he's off on this next adventure before he has time to process anything. So I'm sure he's really in a state of trauma. Anyways, as long as, this guy can talk really well, he goes, I'm human again, and so you will remain, providing the enchantment is not disturbed. Come, take this robe. So again, like bad security, they've got some monsters guarding this thing. And then Alec Holland, he's kind of pining for his wife, sees her in the moon. And then, what sort of madhouse is this? It appears I've been put together with the throes of some architect, or that it's been put together with the throes of some architect's nightmare. And then he overhears the guy saying, gullible fool, played right into my hands. I'd have given anything for this body, anything. And Holland traded it for a paltry taste of fleeting humanity. An ill-considered bargain on his part indeed. So he hears this. Arcane talks about wanting to take over the world now that he's got an immortal body, and Holland decides he can't let that happen, so he runs and finds the enchantment and tips it over, and then they switch back. And then Arcane tries to have him killed. His monsters are all over him, and he goes down. And we start... Oh, here, this is a very important character we'll get to in a second. And so here, this is... dang, now I can't remember her name. I guess I'll have to look. It's like she's Abigail Arcane. She's the niece of the Mad Professor, and so the Patchwork Man. So this is all very good. You see how this is building up. So this the Patchwork Man here. He helps the Swamp Thing when he's about to fall, and at this point, Alec doesn't know that it's very difficult to hurt him. I think he does, but he doesn't. He still is like thinking very much like a mortal being. And so even though the Patchwork Man tries to help him, he ends up falling anyways. And then you've got Javert here, or Cable, coming after him, and the dog is still with him. The dog is still bugged, so whoever the guy is with the monkey is still being able to listen in, because this is the kind of microphone that reaches around the world. That's like 1970s technology. You don't have that anymore. You know, now you put a tracker on a dog and you only got like about 5 miles out of it. I mean, if you're lucky, probably like, 200 feet, at best. But in the 1970s, they knew how to make these trackers. So yeah, then what happens? Then we finally meet Abigail, and Cable meets Abigail, and she's a teacher. Her father, she thinks, is dead, and she stays there mostly for her uncle. And then the castle blows up, and it turns out to be, you don't find out why the castle blows up, but let's see what's he saying here. Where am I? What happened? Huh? Burning embers raining on me. Something's on fire, but how? No! That crazy patchwork creature who tried to stop my fall, is he responsible? So yeah, he kind of guesses that it's the Patchwork Man. It's the Patchwork Man. And then like what we find out here is that this is actually Abigail's father, and he was the brother of Arcane. And so yeah, here you see the kind of merging of the two. It's very good. And so, yep, he's walking, and he remembers his daughter, and then something explodes, and Arcane puts him back together, makes him look like a monster, and of course, he lashes out. Look at that design. I mean, I think it's very close to the Frankenstein monster, which, could cause problems, since, I don't know if it's still under copyright, but the James Whale Frankenstein model was copyrighted. That's why you ever see the Hammer Frankenstein they used. This one does look a little more like the Hammer, or like maybe a merging of the two. And so he remembers his daughter, and he wants to take her away, but he's only half thinking, he's only thinking half human. And then, of course, the Swamp Thing doesn't know that they're related, and he decides to go and rescue Abigail, even though he doesn't know who she is. It's just in his nature to do those sorts of things. And then this guy's thinking like, oh, he'll understand. Nobody else understands me. I tried to save his life. But then what happens is he sees him go for the girl, and he just like freaks out. And then later on, Abigail like screams, but she doesn't recognize him as her father, and he like kind of he's gonna like have to punish her. And maybe that was happening here. It's like, because she, she's being carried off, and then she wakes up, and then here the villagers. You've got the pitchforks and torches, or shotguns in this case, and then the two monsters decide that they have to work together, and the Patchwork Man lifts the bridge, and but both monsters end up leaving the girl. Well, actually, they rescue her as like. They have to kind of rescue her first, even though she wouldn't be in any danger at all if the Patchwork Man hadn't absconded with her. Please help me, I'm falling. And so, then she's kind of hanging on there, and the two monsters decide to work together. And the Patchwork Man more or less sacrifices his life, or at least we're led to think so at this point, I think. And um, and then the villagers are all happy. Cable is like happy. He goes, "Have her. You can have her." And then he goes off, and then Cable, instead of pursuing him, decides to tend to the girl. And I don't know if there's going to be like a love story here. I assume there is. I know she gets married to some character. I don't necessarily know it's him. And then like here we have the gremlin scene is like the Swamp Thing is going back to the bayou with Cable and Abigail. And that brings us to the close of this episode of Thingism 101. And so what have we learned? We've learned that monsters are in the eye of the beholder, aren't they? The Patchwork Man, he's severely damaged, but he still tried to do the right thing. And of course, at the same time, he's stuck in his old life and he wants to be with his daughter again. And of course, the Swamp Thing, he has not processed his trauma yet, has he? He hasn't gotten over the loss of his wife, or the fact that he's turned into a monster and he's already having all these crazy adventures. I do like, knowing what I know about the Alan Moore run, I do like how they're setting this up. This is a very good book so far. And again, I highly recommend it. It's very well written, and we're going to bring it to a close. So remember to hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends, enjoy comic books, read comic books. Got any comments? Comment down below. What other things should I cover in Thingism 101? I've already got a few ideas, but if you know any more obscure things, like I'm planning on covering at some point the Man-Thing, and then of course Ben Grimm the Thing, and then I'm sure like those are just the top 3 right now, so who else should I cover? Again, thank you. Keep reading comics. I love you guys. Over and out.